Well, hello out there, real country. This is Bob Furr filling in for Marc McMain. It is high noon, and you are listening to WMOQ 92.3 on your FM dial. It's time for the Marc McMain show. I'm actually filling in for Jeff Hood, who's filling in for Marc McMain normally, and with me as always, actually not as always, but with me doing a rather poor impersonation of Chastity Stewart, but a great job instead of Chastity Stewart, the one and only Tall Paul Weekly. How are you, Paul?
I am doing, as I say, finer than the hair on a gnat's ankle.
That's a very good one.
That's pretty fine.
I feel like it's been a whole day since I've seen you.
Yeah.
So usually I'm here on Tuesdays. Speaking of that, I'm having a blast filling in. I love getting to do this show while Marc is out on the campaign trail. I'd be normally thrilled to have an extra day, but not so much today. I'm not so much thrilled today because while I'm filling in for Jeff Hood on Wednesdays, and that's great, I'm doing so because he was injured after being struck by a car by a driver who was later charged with DUI. And, you know, people have been asking a lot about my fellow host here on the radio station, and so we thought we would bring him on and have us tell us a little bit about what happened and how he's doing and when he's going to be back. Before I get to that, though, speaking of fellow hosts, I was listening to the show the other day. I was listening to the afternoon show, and Billy Brew called in, and he was talking sports, and he said, quote unquote, "I have to talk about hockey because it's in my contract." I hear this all the time, and especially for people who've never been to a game, and I find it frustrating. I'm a lifelong hockey fan. Our American and women's team just did a great job representing us in the Olympics. The Stanley Cup Finals are going on right now. The series is last night. It was a 5-3 game, only a 2-goal deficit. All the other games have been decided by 1 goal. 2 of the games were in overtime. So it's frustrating when I hear people kind of dismiss hockey. So here's what I'm going to say. Every person I've ever taken to a hockey game, after I take them to the game, they're like, now I get it. Now I understand. So, Billy, if you're out there, you and I have never met. I'd like to meet you, and I'd like to meet you by taking you to an Athens Rock Lobsters hockey game, and then we'll see how you feel about hockey after that. So, all right, I've got that off my chest. I want to now bring on Jeff Hood. Jeff, how are you? Are you out there?
Hey, Bob. Yeah. I am here, and I'm on the mend from my bicycle accident.
I was just going to say, you know, I always start, hey, how are you? It's kind of a throwaway term, but, you know, asking you that question just now had some real meaning. So I want to start out. One of the things that struck me almost immediately after I found out that you were injured in the accident was the What's Happening in Morgan County Facebook page blew up. Somebody posted, hey, I heard Jeff Hood was hurt in an accident. And then what followed was just an avalanche of good thoughts, prayers, concerns. Does anybody know what happened? When you see something like that, did you see it, and how does it make you feel?
You know, I did see it. I want to go back and read all the comments. And I am a native of Morgan County, and I grew up there, went to high school there, and know so many people, have relatives there, but a lot of friends. And, you know, it just warms my heart to see that kind of response and, you know, just the outpouring of support on that page and the prayers and, you know, and it's a similar thing that's happened in Oconee County. We've been here now over 30 years, my wife and I, and it you know, it's just amazing, the social media post and, you know, all the calls and text messages, and we're still getting like actual cards in the U.S. Postal Service and a lot of food. So, yeah, but as far as the one on the Morgan County Facebook page, just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what makes you appreciate being in a small community, small area, or collection of small communities, I guess is the best way to describe it. So listen, I started the interview by saying, how are you? Let's take a deep dive on that. Exactly how are you? You know, tell us about how you're feeling, how things are going, when we can expect you back, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm trying to ease back into my regular schedule. I'm limited on what I can do. I work out a lot. I'm not working out much at all now following my injury or bicycle accident, but they are letting me get on a stationary bike, and that's kind of ironic because I was on a bicycle when I got hit. But my legs are fine. I've got a broken scapula on my left side, which is where I landed. They estimated I soared through the air about 20 feet, which is the equivalent of 2 basketball goals. You put one on top of the other. I flew through the air, landed fortunately on a patch of grass. Immediately broke. I knew something in my shoulder. Broke 5 ribs. Broke 4 vertebrae in my lower back. But God spared me. My life, I wasn't paralyzed, and a few inches here, a few inches there. I'd be a goner. So I'm fortunate to have what I would say in that kind of a traumatic incident. The few injuries I'm aware of, and but yeah, just I'll tell you the other thing. I'm having to nurse this shoulder, but it's incredible when you take a blow like that. It's been 16 days now since it occurred. It's just trying to rebuild my stamina. The blow I took, my body head to toe, and I'm pretty athletic, but gosh, it's so hard, just to keep going without getting tired.
Well, and you sound great, by the way. I mean, I'll tell you that. You sound fantastic. In fact, kind of wondering why you're not here, frankly. You may be slacking a little bit, as good as you sound. But, yeah, I used to always tell people in car accidents when I responded to them that, they were like, I'm fine. I'm like, no, go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm not hurt. I'm like, you're not hurt now. Give it 24 hours, right? So I bet you had some new visitors of areas that you rediscovered on your body over the next 24 hours.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. As far as my voice, when the first person got to me, the experience I had just occurred and, was beat up, pretty severely. Then it was a nurse, and she was amazed. She said, your voice, sounds like a normal person. You're alert, you're calm. So just thankful, again, the limited injuries. And, but yeah, I hope to get back on the air soon, maybe next week or the following week. I would surely think by then. I'm going to my orthopedist next Wednesday for an update, and hopefully he's going to say things are progressing well, and I feel like they are.
Well, I'm glad to be keeping your seat warm, but I'll be even gladder to give it back up to you, that's for sure. You're listening to Marc McMain Show here on WMOQ 92.3 on your FM dial. It's Bob Furr filling in for Jeff Hood, who normally fills in for Marc on Wednesdays, and my guest is, in fact, the same Jeff Hood, who's sharing the experience he had with his recent accident and his road to recovery. So, Jeff, I want to ask you a question because I was thinking about this, and it always strikes me when something bad happens, whether it be an accident or a tragedy or, a disaster of some kind, there always seems to be somebody saying, it was just a normal day. It was just like any other day. Walk us through the day. Walk us through the day of, I wouldn't say, like you said, you've been blessed, right? Your life hasn't radically changed, but it sure took a different turn than you expected when you woke up that morning. Walk us through the day.
Yeah. So it was Memorial Day, Monday, and 2 weeks ago, just over 2 weeks ago. And so I got up, it was cloudy, and I ate breakfast, and around 7:45 a.m., I was literally on the fence on, do I go to the gym or a little bit of a cloud cover? Is it going to rain, or do I go ride my bike? And I had planned on going to an event in Madison that we have been promoting on the station, the Ride for America. Stan Malden, the motorcycles coming in from Loganville, arrive in Madison around 11 a.m. So I knew the route I take from my house in Oconee County. I ride out to High Shoals and then kind of do a loop. It takes me hour 45 minutes, and I've rode that route many times for 20 years. And so I thought, well, I've got 8 a.m. I've got plenty of time. I'll be back home by 9:45 at the latest. I'll take a quick shower, jump in the car, go to Madison, and enjoy and honor those that that gave their sacrifice, ultimate sacrifice on Memorial Day at 11 a.m. in Madison. I love going to events like that. That was the plan. Well, it got derailed, and there was very little traffic, a lot of visibility. It was a cloudy day, but still, a little after 8 a.m. Had my all my safety precautions going, as I always do: the strobe light, the bright clothing, the shiny red helmet, and far right side of the road. And I heard very light traffic, and I heard a vehicle approaching. And I kept expecting it to go around me, but unfortunately, it hit me, and the driver never hit the brakes, and it was a life-changing experience.
And what time of the day was this again?
About a few minutes after 8. I'd say 8:05 is when I was struck. And it for folks that know Oconee County, I was on Malcolm Bridge Road, almost directly across from the elementary school.
Okay, so hold please. It's 8:05 in the morning, and as I understand it, the driver was charged with DUI?
Yeah, now, he's been charged with driving under the influence of drugs. And I will say this, and I'll tell you, I'm only going to tell you what I have learned from law enforcement, that he's got a medical condition, and so it was not, drugs, just kind of recreational or anything like that. Apparently, it had to do with his medication for his illness, and he shouldn't have been driving. But we'll see how all that works out.
Gotcha.
And that's from the police report, the DUI and toxicology. And so, it was just, I get hit and don't hear tires squealing. And that went through my mind immediately. It's like, wow, I just got hit. I mean, believe it or not, I'm flying through the air and I didn't hear tires squealing. You didn't slow down. And then next thing I know, I go soaring through the air and land on my left side, break my shoulder, ribs, and start skidding on the ground. And the helmet, oh my gosh, the helmet also, I'd say, saved me. If not saved my life, it saved me from some massive head injuries.
So first of all, going back to the driver, so that's interesting to learn. I mean, it sounds like it was a situation maybe of irresponsibility rather than recklessness. Which certainly changes the character of things. But I'm interested by what you said next about the thoughts going through your head. So I wish I had somebody who could do the math on this for me. If you fly 20 feet through the air, like how long are you airborne? How long do you think you were in the air?
I need to see if they can calculate that. Maybe 2 seconds. And I do remember, it's almost like at first when I get hit, I hear an explosion, and I think that's my tire on the rear of my bike that explodes. And then I hear metal crunching. And the first thing that went through my mind is, great, I just got hit, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Like, what? And then I think, oh, no, this isn't going to end well. And I thought, my life may be over. And then when I landed in the ground, I was kind of like a projectile flying through the air. And fortunately, I landed in a patch of grass. If it was a little to the left, I would have hit a concrete curb. And if it was further to the right, I could have actually hit a tree limb or landed in some trees. But I hit a patch of grass on my left side, and then I skidded and ironically came to rest under a magnolia tree on my back. So but when I came to rest on my back, I immediately couldn't breathe. I'm struggling to breathe, and I've had a broken rib, and I knew I had at least one, and it turned out 5 broken ribs. So thankfully, I stayed alert and was not knocked out from the hit, and forced myself to breathe. And that took about 60 seconds to get the oxygen flowing. And I did that on my own. Otherwise, there's multiple times I could have died from the original impact, from the SUV that hit me, from when I landed on the ground. I could have landed on my head or neck. I landed on my shoulder. And then when all the broken ribs, I could have been unconscious and not, known to force myself to breathe. And I had to try hard to get the air going. So I'm just very, very fortunate to be around.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. And I got to say, that was a lot of thoughts going through your head in 2 seconds as you're flying. I can see why you do the football games. You can process a lot of information at the same time. So, all right, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about that experience of being rescued, I guess, for lack of a better word. In the meantime, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show on WMOQ, Real Country 92.3 on your FM dial. Talking with Jeff Hood, normally fills in for Mark. I'm keeping his seat warm on Wednesdays. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we return, we will talk a little bit further with Jeff.
The The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting MadisonTrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
I chuckled at a cartoon that showed a news conference by a United States senator who announced that he was divorcing his family so he could spend more time with politics. We may laugh, but the truth is many people make that statement every day. Maybe not with words, but with their actions. In fact, if a politician retires from his work to spend more time with his family, it becomes the lead story met with cynicism on the evening news, while the one who rejects his family advancing his career is commonplace. God tells us we should work hard to the glory of God, but He has clearly shown that we must have priorities. A relationship with God first, and family follows that. What does your focus tell you about your priorities? The Bible says that we have brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of it. It's good to focus on the things that last, like putting God first, and then family, and then people all around us that God loves. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click television to watch our TV spots.
I'm former Congressman Jody Heiss, and we have a critical runoff election coming up on June 16th, and I want to urge you to get out and vote for Marc McMain for State Senate. Marc is a solid and trusted conservative. He'll defend our constitutional rights, support law enforcement, and fight for Georgia families. But dark money groups are now attacking Marc because they know he is the true conservative in this race. So don't stay at home, and let's all keep the main thing the McMain thing. Paid for by Marc for Georgia Incorporated.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Marc McMain Show here on Real Country 92.3. This is Bob Furr filling in for Jeff Hood, who normally fills in for Marc on Wednesdays, and we hope to have Jeff back here in the studio soon, but right now we've got him on the phone, and we're talking about the accident that's got me warm in his seat for him. So, Jeff, what I wanted to ask you is, so I spent a long time in the emergency services, recently returned to it, and, you know, whenever I would respond to something, I always felt a great sense of urgency and to get there as quickly as possible, but I mean safely, of course, but as quickly as possible. And part of that was just kind of having this feeling and understanding, you know, here's someone who has encountered an experience they've probably never had before. They're hurt, they're in shock, they're scared, they're feeling alone. You know, you come to a rest after flying through the air. Walk us through the help coming to you, how they helped, you know, anything surprised you, what stood out the most to you. Take us from the side of that road to the hospital and the next steps.
Well, I'll tell you, Bob, this is a great question because I've thought about this a lot. So the gentleman that hit me who was disoriented, he did, and I will thank him, he called for help, 911. And so I knew that gave me peace of mind. I couldn't move, and I knew I had multiple injuries, and I knew I just needed to stay stationary on the ground and wait and continue, you know, my breathing because of the broken ribs and other injuries. And so I had been laying there. Once I had the peace of mind that an ambulance was on the way, 5 minutes into that, just really saying a prayer to God for sparing my life, thinking about my family. Oh, and by the way, I was trying to find my cell phone, but it had gotten slung out of my pocket, so I had no way to try to call my wife or kids. So, but that's okay. I had to take care of myself, and I just stayed calm. Well, I heard a vehicle stop, and I could turn my head just enough to see back up at the road. It was a minivan, and a lady got out, and she had saw the gentleman that hit me up at the road, and then she saw me, and she came running to me, and she said, "Hi, my name is Christina. Are you doing okay? You know, what's going on? You know, are you what do you think your injuries are?" And so I told her, and she looked me over, and she said, "I'm a nurse, and I'm going to stay with you until the ambulance arrives." So Christina and I had talked a few days ago. she was, I said, you were my little angel that God sent. You know, I had been hit and just in the waiting mode for the ambulance. And so she offered, she looked me over and said, I was going to be okay, she thought. But just the fact that a nurse was there with me just gave me so much peace and comfort. The ambulance arrived, and they were just first class, the paramedics. My family had gotten word, and then they slowly started to trickle in. And I tell you, that just ripped my heart out, looking over and seeing my daughter and my wife see me in that condition, about to be put on a platform to be loaded into an ambulance. And then the deputies from Oconee County, I believe it was deputies Sidwell and Watson, just first class, came over, talked to me, and it just went flawlessly. All the first responders, and then they were very careful getting me out from under the tree because of low hanging branches, got me on the stretcher or whatever, and into the ambulance, and then I knew I was in good hands. I mean, really the entire time. So from that standpoint, I don't want to go through that experience again, but all the first responders, law enforcement, they were just top notch.
And were you overnight in the hospital, or how long were you in the hospital before you were able to go home?
Yeah. So I was in the ER on Memorial Day morning, and then they transferred me to a room. They X-rayed every bone in my body, and this scan and that MRI and this X-ray. And so Monday afternoon, they had said I would probably have to have surgery on my shoulder and my back. But then they came back the next morning and said there was some consultation, and they just kind of felt better in the way the breaks occurred for me to just go home and let them heal naturally. And so, once again, I feel very fortunate from that standpoint. So my wife has just been amazing, taking care of me. Our kids, they're grown. Our son's in his late 20s, our daughter in early 30s. They live close by. And, one thing I've learned, primarily from the broken shoulder and just, kind of being lethargic a lot, is I have to be dependent on my wife, and I'm trying to every day become less dependent, just the little things like getting dressed. It's hard. I got limited use on my left arm. The arm's fine. It's just because of the left broken shoulder. And it's hard to put on my socks. And she's been doing it. And so I've tried to figure out how to put on socks with one arm. And so, just the little things like that, because she has done so much for me over these last couple of weeks.
There's two things that strike me as you're talking. By the way, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show on Real Country 92.3. Bob Furr filling in for Mark, talking with Jeff Hood about his experience with a near miss, I guess is a good word, and a blessing that he's in as good a shape. And I say that blessing because, you just think about people who have been in worse accidents, right? And the long, losing maybe the ability to move, or even a longer road to recovery, or even just not having the support system. And it, it just kind of, it's got to be one of those moments, Jeff, that makes you just really appreciate everything you have in life, right? And so let me ask you about that. Like, how has this impacted your outlook or your thought process, or, has this changed Jeff Hood in any way?
Well, I think so, Bob. We're involved in Mars Hill Baptist Church over here, and, I'm a Christian, a believer, and if anything, I think it's made me a stronger believer. And, I keep telling Jesus and, God, I pray that, I want to be an inspiration to people, in many ways, from my belief as a Christian, but just as a good citizen in the community. I love to stay involved in different activities, but, I just kind of, I go out to breakfast, and I'll say Chick-fil-A because I love going there and getting a biscuit. And, and I just love, I think it's changed me from I was more maybe not as talkative, but now I just feel like I want to love on people. And a lot of them know I had the injury, and I think it's going to change me in a lot of ways of just going out of my way to tell people, hey, have a great day. and you know, things like that. And that's awesome. I think, you know, we would be in a better world if we kind of had that line of thinking anyway.
Well, and I mean, we know as men of faith, right? This is why these things happen, right? It's hard to look at.
Right.
I heard a great line on a show I was watching last night about, you know, sometimes God's plan isn't always a blessing, or doesn't seem like a blessing, you know, and just having that impact on you, and especially somebody in your position to influence others. You know, it's just a great part of the story as well. So let's talk real quick about this. You know, we always hear about bikes and cars sharing the road. Obviously, you're a pretty serious bicyclist and all that. You know, what would you say about that topic? And you know, I guess continuing the thought of how do we use this for the betterment of everyone. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, wear a helmet and wear a top. Don't spare any expense with your helmet, because you could probably go to Dollar General or something and find a helmet, but is it really going to offer you the protection you need? And fortunately, I had went to a bicycle shop and had a really nice helmet. And I remember when I'm skidding through the grass and that helmet is just taking blow after blow. And it's crazy. I have all these thoughts going through my mind, but one thing that I thought of was like, oh man, that was worth every penny I paid for this helmet. And so yeah, first and foremost, wear a helmet. And, you know, I like to ride alone, and I've ridden that route many times for 20 years. I think I said that, and I take all the safety precautions, and I've never had a motorist come close to hitting me, but all it takes is one, a distracted driver, be it a DUI or looking at their phone, just not paying attention. So that's just one of the risks, unfortunately, of riding on the highway, to the right, if there's not a bike trail. So it's going to be hard to get back on the actual road for a while for me, wondering if the guy coming up on me is actually, paying attention. And my wife wants me, when I do get back on a bike, to ride on a designated bike trail, which is probably what I'll do. But biking is a great sport, so, maybe I would recommend definitely the helmet, but maybe riding in a group. And, if there's 5 or 6, 7 bikers, even for a distracted driver, it may be kind of hard not to see that. But, there's always that risk, though, when you're out on a bicycle of an accident.
And I think that's the big lesson to drivers out there is distracted driving. I know when I was in the emergency services, drunk driving was the big concern at the time, and we ain't seen nothing yet. A lot of times you'll have people who are intoxicated know they're intoxicated, and so they're actually being extra careful. And I'm not advocating, obviously, for that, but somebody looking down at their phone, right. And there's just, especially young people, hear me, young people out there, if you're listening, it's amazing how quickly things can happen. And as my father-in-law used to say, life doesn't often give second chances. But I guess you could argue it's given you one, Jeff. So final thoughts, anything you would leave meaning your and my and the station's listeners with about your experience?
One other thing I want to add, Bob, in addition to the helmet, I think it is responsibility of the bike rider to have flashers, something that will stand out from a far distance that you're there on your bike, and wear bright clothing, because I do see bikers wearing like dark clothing, and that's very hard to see. So, there's some responsibility on both sides for the bike rider and the motorist. But, I guess the last thing would be, I'm just overwhelmed and just blown away by the love and support shown by so many friends, not only in Morgan and Oconee County, but around the state of Georgia.
Well, it's great to hear from you, Jeff. Do me a favor, come kick me out of your seat, will you? I hope we'll have you back on the air next week here on Wednesdays.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep Charlie updated on, she does the scheduling, possibly next week, but hopefully, definitely, I'm hoping at least in 2 weeks I'll be back. But we'll see about next week. That is when I go see my orthopedist, and he'll give me a better idea where I stand.
Well, I'm here for you, but I'm ready to have you back. So, well, you've been listening to Jeff Hood telling us about his experience. We wish him Godspeed for a speedy recovery. We look forward to having him back on the air. In the meantime, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show here on WMOQ, Real Country 92.3. We're going to take a short commercial break, and then we will be right back. As the TV show Monty Python used to say, something completely different.
The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting madisontrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
When you walk through the doors of Campton Restaurant, you're not just here for a meal, you're part of a tradition. I'm fourth-generation owner Josh Parker, and for nearly 40 years, families in Walton County and surrounding areas have gathered around our tables to share stories, laughter, and good Southern cooking. From crispy fried chicken to heart-healthy daily specials, there's always a plate waiting with your name on it. We're open Tuesday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. and 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays. So come on by, make yourself at home, and experience Campton Restaurant, where family tradition meets every meal.
You ever roll out of bed and feel like you lost a fight with a tractor? If your back's barking, your neck's complaining, and your knees pop louder than a box of cereal, it might be time for the Joint Chiropractic. There are no appointments, no insurance mess, and no sitting around all day. You just walk in, get adjusted, and head back out feeling human again. Now serving Covington and Monroe, whether you've been hauling, hunting, working, or just sleeping funny, the Joint Chiropractic keeps you moving smooth and feeling right. The Joint Chiropractic, because snap, crackle, and pop belong in your cereal and not your spine.
It's family fun every Saturday night at the Winder Barrel Speedway in Winder. Gates open at 4 p.m. and the green flag drops at 7 p.m. Don't miss the excitement of the greatest show on dirt as drivers buckle up, get door to door, and bumper to bumper that take that checkered flag. It's the Winder Barrel Speedway, 330 Donahue Road in Winder. Call 770-867-6327 or go to winderbarrelspeedway.com. It's the place to be on Saturday night.
All right, folks, welcome back here to Real Country 92.3. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show. Bob Furr filling in for Jeff Hood, who we've just been talking to. Glad to hear he is on the mend and he'll be back soon. And now there used to be a TV show, a comedy show on many years ago called Monty Python's Flying Circus. And they were known for like doing things that were just kind of offbeat and a little bit different. And right before they did, they would always say, and now for something completely different. So we're going to talk a little bit about transportation history in Madison and the area. And the way this came together was, as we've been talking on the Tuesdays 250 by 50s, I've really come to appreciate just how much transportation impacted the this country and such like that. And then I'm remembering too that, I remember when we started talking about America 250 in Madison and how do we take advantage of it, right? We're a historic tourist destination. It's the 250th birthday of America. How do we take advantage of it? And the conversations were around, because nothing really went down in Georgia during the American Revolution, honestly. The British started their southern campaign by landing in Savannah and took Charleston. But mostly what you had here in Georgia during the American Revolution was a civil war. You had people who came over from the old country to the new world. They brought their grudges and feuds with them, and they separated into two different factions. And then, so what you had here in Georgia during the Civil War was basically, there was one little skirmish, a battle called Kettle Creek, not too far from here, but mostly it was a civil war. And so my point was, let's not try to be something that we're not, right? It's America 250, not America 1776. And we were laughing because when we saw the Alabama guide, like Alabama has got these colonial figures walking across the front lawn. Like Alabama wasn't even a colony, wasn't even a state until the second round, And I said, let's focus on something different. Madison has been here for 217 years and Morgan County 219 years of that 250-year history. And in fact, as we thought about doing an America 250 tour on the trolley, I'm like, we're already doing it. Like, telling Madison's story is essentially already telling the story of America, and that's true for transportation as well, right? You can see how transportation has played a role. Now, normally what you would expect is I would bring in some expert on transportation history in the area, and that's what we usually do. We had Trey Wellborn on talking about barbecue or whatever the case may be, but this time I'm like, let's bring in a first-hand experience, right? Let's bring in somebody who actually experienced Madison's history. And so with us today is Mary Jane Jones. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Mary, we always like to start the show by getting to know our guests a little bit. So just tell us a little about yourself, who you are, your life in Madison, how you came to be here, and et cetera.
Well, I'm so lucky to be one of Madison's first families. In fact, our family home was built by my mother's brother. He finished the house in 1811. And my daddy bought the house in the 1830s and finished it. I was about 10 years old by the time he bought the house. But it's a lovely home, and it's still standing today for folks who want to see it.
So now, if you were about 10 years old when your dad bought the house in the 1830s, that would make you about...
Yes, sir, I must have checked. Regardless of the year I was born, I'm sure in every era, decorum dictates that such a query be deemed inappropriate for a lady to answer. Thank you, though.
Paul, I think she's telling me not to ask about her age.
Indeed.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about the role that transportation played in Madison becoming Madison, right? And like many places in this country, it starts with water, right? And so the reason Madison became Madison is because of a place called Round Bowl Spring. It's a freshwater source, two side-by-side springs that beat out another spring, and because it did, that's why the current Madison was chosen to be the location of the county seat for Morgan County. So how do they find that water? Well, it starts with wildlife, obviously. You know, you would have had all manner of wildlife, elk, wolves, bear, bobcat. You would have even had bison in the area. Kind of one of the cool things about the safari park outside of town is we brought buffalo, American bison, back here for the first time in 250 years. And so they would have made what many people will call game trails once they found the water source. Along come the Native Americans. They follow the game trails. After the Native Americans come the settlers and the early fur trappers and such. They follow the Native American trails. Sooner or later, somebody comes along on a horse. Then somebody wants to settle in the area because there's water. And so after that, they come along and they've got a wagon of some kind. And sure enough, these paths that were started by elk and all that sort of thing would all be filled in, and they would have come in, and now you've got the makings of what would eventually become the transportation system. So that's all roads lead to water, all roads lead to Madison. So how about you, Stephanie? How did you guys get water back in the day?
That's an excellent question. I'm sure one my daddy would probably be able to answer better. As a woman of the house, that just wasn't something in my jurisdiction, sir. When I woke up, the water was already there. It was ready. I'm sure it got there by horse. I mean, that's the only acceptable form of transportation, in my opinion.
I see. No, you might have had a covered well house maybe on your own property, such a big, beautiful estate like that. But even then...
I'm sure it was hidden by flowers or other such things. When I take my evening walk, that's not something I'm looking for, sir.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about Madison getting connected to the outside world, because a very big factor in Madison becoming the Madison that it is today was the old stagecoach route. And the stagecoach route ran along what is now the Dixie Highway and turns into Old Post Road. And this was the main transportation route through the American South. So it ran from New Orleans through Madison on its way to Augusta. And then from Augusta, you had two choices. You can continue to the coast to Charleston, where you would connect to the stagecoach routes up and down the coast. Because remember, at this time, 1809, more than, the vast majority of Americans live within 25 miles of the ocean, right? So that's where all the main transportation routes are. However, you could also hang a left in Augusta and head north and connect something to what was called the Old Wagon Road. The Old Wagon Road ran all the way from kind of north up kind of into the Natchez Trace, Tennessee area, and then all the way up into Philadelphia. And so the stagecoach comes to town, and now people are transiting through the stagecoach coming through. So, Mary, what do you remember about the stagecoach coming through town?
Well, the stagecoach did bring people, news, business opportunities and a fair amount of gossip. After all, confining strangers together for hours practically guarantees interesting conversation. As for me, 8 strangers in a coach, voluntarily, I believe I shall simply stay home. The smell alone, the thought of it, y'all, and the conversation. I can't imagine having to make conversation. How many calling cards do you have on you? Who's going to properly introduce you? So many questions abound.
So, no stagecoach rides in your past, or?
No, I was perfectly happy at home here in Madison, where everything I have is here.
Well, where are you going to meet a man then?
Oh, darling, with the circles my daddy travels in, they come to me.
Probably understandable. I can see that. And your point about the stagecoach is great. I talk about on the trolley tour, you would pull up in front of a building we have in Madison called the Stagecoach House. And you would be very happy to get there because you would have been riding in that stagecoach for 7 to 8 days over hot, bumpy, southern, dusty roads, maybe for hours at a time, 12 hours a day, 7 to 8 days at a time over hot, bumpy, dusty southern roads, right? And you are cramped in there, as Miss Jones said, with 7 to 9 other people.
They never stop for a restroom break?
Well, they would stop. You'd stop. Typically what you would do is you'd stop for maybe 20 minutes at a time. Because remember, they had to change the horses, right? Horses aren't doing 12 hours a day.
At the way station.
So you'd change out the horses, get a chance to stretch your legs. But you would only, maybe once a day or every 2 days, get a stop to really, stop and refresh yourself. And you might get to spend the night somewhere, but maybe not to get a full bath. By the way, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show here on Real Country 92.3. We are talking with Mary Jane Jones, who was born in forgot about that. Mary Jane Jones, about her experience with transportation in Madison. So anyway, you would have pulled up in front of the Stagecoach House, and there were 2 wings that used to extend off the house, and you would go into those wings, and you get a chance to bathe and refresh yourself, and I always joke that after that hot, bumpy, sweaty, dusty, dirty ride, getting to take that bath was the second best thing that happened to you. The best thing that happened to you was that the other 7 to 9 people on the stagecoach also got to go in and take a bath before you had to get back in the stagecoach with them and continue the journey. Now, unlike in the day of today, when the proper thing to do on an aircraft is to let other people get off the plane before you, this is where you probably wanted to be the first one out of the stagecoach, because typically they're not changing the bathwater after every person. So, Mary Jane, have you ever had to jump into somebody else's bathwater?
Lord almighty, I can't even relish the thought. Nothing tests Christian virtue quite like stagecoach travel. Thank goodness. I can't even imagine myself in such a situation. That bath came to me first, sir, as the eldest of the daughters. No.
I can imagine that would be probably a little bit below your station in life, if I might imagine. All right, so now I want to ask you a little bit about the next big thing that, of course, happens in Madison is in the 1830s, the railroad comes to town. And how can I ask this, Paul, without getting into trouble? My understanding is that you would have been present in Madison before the railroad arrived, but then also after the railroad arrived. May I ask, what were your first impressions of the railroad coming to town?
Well, I do believe that there's so many beautiful porches here in Georgia, and to be traveling at such a speed, to not be able to look at your neighbors and admire what they've done to the houses seems like a crime. And a machine hurtling down iron tracks at 20 miles an hour, it hardly seems natural. I do like the idea of being able to go to a big city, but I think that everything I have is right here in Madison and Morgan County. I just don't understand the need to go so fast. Why does everyone want to go so fast?
It's a good question, and one that when we come back from this commercial break, we'll continue to delve into as we look at some future forms of transportation that were occurring in Madison. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show, Real Country 92.3. Bob Furr filling in for Mark, filling in for Jeff Hood today, filling in for Mark. We're going to get off track here for a second and arrive at some commercials, and then we'll return right back here.
The Madison Trolley Company is Morgan County's newest 5-star attraction. We offer historic Madison tours year-round, a haunted history experience in the fall, and our Madison Lights Christmas Tour and Mary Maddie Express Adventure for kids have become new holiday traditions. Our private charters add vintage charm to weddings and special occasions aboard a historic trolley by day, party trolley by night. Find us on the Madison Town Square or get on board by visiting MadisonTrolley.com or calling us at 706-997-1800.
Hey, this is attorney Bart Bitton with Bitton & Bitton. I live and work right here in Monroe, Georgia, and I am proud to serve this area. If you've been hurt in a car accident, you don't need some out-of-town lawyer that treats you like a number. You deserve a local lawyer you can trust, someone who lives here, works here, and takes care of people. So remember this, if you're ever in a car accident, be smart, call Bart. Bitton & Bitton, local lawyers you can trust.
If you like Brian Kemp, you're going to love Rick Jackson.
Rick Jackson's been a good supporter of mine. He's got a great story. I've kind of felt like for really 2 years now that race is right for political outsiders, especially somebody that could sell fun.
Rick Jackson, a conservative outsider who will make Georgia proud, just like Brian Kemp.
I'm Rick Jackson. Brian Kemp wins big for Georgia. Record jobs, teacher pay raises, and when Hollywood liberals tried to boycott Georgia, Kemp never backed down.
The conservative outsider, just like Kemp.
As governor, I'll slash property taxes and lead America in job creation. I'm Rick Jackson. Like Governor Kemp, I'll fight for Georgia and win big.
Rick Jackson's been a good supporter of mine. He's got a great story.
Early voting is now open. Runoff election Tuesday, June 16th. Paid for by Rick Jackson for Governor Incorporated.
Big out-of-state gambling companies have big plans to do whatever they want in Georgia. Those plans start with having liberal Democrat Keisha Lance Bottoms and Rhino Marc McMain in their pocket. Gambling and casinos are destroying lives of families across Georgia. Higher bankruptcy rates, depression, a rise in addiction. But Rhino Marc McMain is with them, not us. Now we learn McMain's invested in companies involved in big tech AI factory data centers. The same data centers that are buying up Georgia land, driving up electricity rates, and failing to create jobs. Rhino liberal Marc McMain, ready to risk our futures to serve big gambling and big tech data centers, not us. A Christian family man, Doug McKillop, shares our conservative values. McKillop can't be bought, refusing special interest contributions, even willing to lose his House seat to defend our values and ban late-term abortions. On Tuesday, June 16th, vote for conservative Doug McKillop for State Senate.
Paid for by Doug for a conservative Georgia.
And welcome back to the Real Marc McMain Show here on Real Country 92.3. We are talking about the history of transportation in Madison, and we're having that conversation with Madison resident Mary Jane Jones, who has lived in Madison all the way back to shortly after she was born in the...
Sir, I must object over and over.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to set the context. So railroads played a big part in Madison. I mean, you could argue that Madison was built on the railroad. Those initial trains come to town. You've got passenger traffic coming through. Now, one of the things is that when Sherman's March was on the way, apparently quite a few people in town loaded up onto the train, especially people who had known ties to secessionism and such. And apparently right before the 20th Corps arrived in town, there was a train heading out of town toward the coast pretty quickly. Remember anything about that, Mary Jane?
Well, I know that Daddy was too old to serve in the war, but my brother did serve as a surgeon, and there was so many gentlemen having to go to the hospitals here in town, and many of our homes were actually served to help those gentlemen get better. As a woman, I did my best to help with those men, but it was a horrible time. Yeah, everything really in Madison revolving around the train during the Civil War. Before that, the antebellum period, it's really what helped cotton become king, being able to move goods to Atlanta or to the coast, to Atlanta very quickly. And then during the war, of course, all manner of agriculture goods and such like that could be moved very quickly out there as well. And so we were able to, very quickly kind of recover that. But then, things changed.
changed, right? As they always do, because we now had the advent of the automobile. And just in time for that conversation, we have joining us from Madison, Georgia. His title is Information Specialist and Planner, which my first thought was that title is just not up to Ken Coker. His title should be knower of all things. But then I thought about it. When I think about you and all the roles I've seen you in, you truly are an information specialist and planner.
Okay.
So we've been talking here about transportation history up to and just after the Civil War and surrounding the railroads. But now let's talk about, and we've got Mary Jane Jones here sharing her perspective from the city.
Lovely to meet you, sir.
Let's talk about the first automobiles that arrived here in Madison.
What are those?
Well, they're vehicles that power themselves with an engine on wheels.
So no horses. So you're telling me we've lost the horses.
Yeah, they were actually initially called horseless carriages.
And who's your driver?
Well, you drive yourself.
No horses and no driver.
No, you drive yourself.
I do object.
Well, Ken, tell us a little bit about the first automobiles arriving in Madison.
So they came in around 1911, and there were very, very few of them. But as more and more of them came available, we started to see dealerships in town. So there was Ben S. Thompson sold Fords, and he was one of the longest Ford dealers in the United States when he finally retired. I think he had been doing it for 57 years or something like that. There was W.H. Adams. He sold Cadillacs and Buicks. And then there were just some other guys who had different, there were so many different automobile brands then. But those were the two longest lasting. And so it was interesting because the streets around the square are very wide. And that was because when they were planning it, they had wagons of cotton and people walking in the roads because the roads were kind of almost like the sidewalks. People just walked in them. But once the cars start coming, that became a little hazardous.
And what did you feed the cars? Did you feed them oats? How did they go?
Well, you might remember that there was a byproduct of kerosene called gasoline that you might have used for cleaning. So they
I didn't do any cleaning.
I'm sorry. Yeah, those who did it for you probably used it. And so early automobile owners would actually buy cans of gasoline at like drugstores and general stores.
And how long did it take before the majority or a significant number of people in Madison owned their own cars and were driving themselves around?
I think by 1920 it was pretty ubiquitous.
And now, what about people coming from elsewhere? How did Madison get connected with? Well, I guess before that, let's talk about the streets in Madison. Are these all still dirt roads?
Still dirt roads.
Okay, and what kind of mess did that create?
Oh, darling, let's not get started on the hems of my dress, the soles of my feet. I had to wear hats, and it wasn't for religious purposes. It was just to keep the dust out of my hair. But think of the torrential downpours and that Georgia clay. I mean, you could hardly walk.
You're listening to the Marc McMain Show on Real Country 92.3, and we are getting two interesting perspectives on the history of transportation here. Bob Furr filling in. So let's talk about the interstate roads now coming here. I think it was the Dixie Highway that first arrived. Tell us a little bit about Madison getting connected by the outside world by interstates.
So before we had even the highway system, the numbered highway system that the federal government did, there was really no highways that people followed. And so what different groups would do in order to spur tourism, they would create named highways. And so the one that came through Georgia primarily, there were several, but the primary one was the Dixie Highway. And then that was actually started by Mr. Flagler in Florida. And the idea was to get people from the north to drive all the way to Florida. And so towns all across Georgia were really vying to be on that road, and Madison was one of them. And so there ended up being several offshoots of it. And so we were on one of those offshoots, and it was called the Capital Route because it went through Atlanta and Louisville and and Savannah, and so those were all capitals at one point in time.
And so this would have been the point too. Though this is thanks to these new interstate roadway systems and the advent of mass-produced automobiles. This is the first time in American history that people are starting to actually tour the entire country, driving around in cars. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the period where Miss Jones' house was turned into kind of an early bed and breakfast for these travelers called Travelers Rest.
Wait, you do jest. My house turned into a traveler's inn.
Well, Ken, I'll let you take that one.
That's true. After years after you were there, Mr. Turnell turned it. It was actually Travelers Inn.
Travelers Inn, gotcha.
We did have a Travelers Rest.
Yes,
as well,
that you
across the
refused to
street.
cover because it's 5 feet outside the Madison City
well, no,
line.
There was actually one in the city.
Okay,
as well.
gotcha.
Yeah. And so Mr. Turnell, who had actually owned the old Turnell Hotel, the big hotel, opened up an inn, and they would serve food, and also townspeople could come for dinner. And I think a Sunday chicken dinner was 25 cents.
And who was cleaning the chamber pots at this point in time? I can't imagine all of these people in Daddy's house.
Well, believe it or not, they had something called plumbing where you didn't have to go to the little house out back. There were actually rooms within the house that you could use, and the waste would just be taken away by a system.
Bless your heart. Well, I hope all of these roads that y'all talk about maybe lead to Milledgeville. I hear there's a certain hospital that maybe these people need to go to with all this strange talk.
And just to be clear, if the purpose of these roadways were to attract people from the north, it'd be a safe assumption that there were a fair number of Yankees who spent the night and visited and spent time in Miss Jones's house. Wouldn't that be true?
Absolutely. The newspapers at the time tended to report on who the visitors were, and we actually had international visitors as well. But yeah, lots of people from the north.
Oh dear. I'm just flummoxed at all of this talk. I'm quite overcome.
Well, let's talk about now I-20 and the Eisenhower Interstate System. You and I have talked about this. So the Eisenhower Interstate, you actually clued me into something I didn't know, which that Eisenhower's first experience was he was a young man in the military shortly after World War I. He had been part of an expedition to see how long does it take to move a military force across the country on the current roadway system, and it didn't go well.
It took forever.
Then he gets to Normandy, and we land on Normandy, and the invasion is so successful that eventually we get to the point where the Germans are retreating faster than the Allies can advance. And that they get so far ahead of their supply lines that's what results in the famous Battle of the Bulge. Then after that, he gets to Germany and he sees the Autobahn and he's like, I'll take one of these, please. And so the Eisenhower Interstate System is developed in from the 50s into the 60s and all the way into the 70s,
yeah.
really. And the idea was this was the Cold War, so we could move populations and military forces quickly. And in 1969, it arrives in Madison. And how did that impact the city?
Well, it certainly kept, as all the transportation with I know you talked about the stagecoaches and the railroad. It kept people both coming to Madison to visit, and it also was very good for industry because we did have some post-war industry here with a furniture plant and Wellington leisure sports and that sort of thing. So it kept people coming. So you'll see like a place like Washington, Georgia, that's got great stuff and is a lot like Madison, but it just doesn't have the people visiting because it's not on a main route like Madison is.
And finally, let's talk about the airport. When did the first airport come to town?
First airport came in the 30s. It was part of one of FDR's Make Work programs. So I think it was a PWA program. And the reason really that we got one was because the main route was from Augusta to Atlanta. And we were about halfway in between. And so just in case the airplane couldn't make it, they needed kind of an emergency airport. Though at the time, Madisonians really thought that this was going to be just like the train station and cars coming along, that they were going to really benefit from this and get to fly in and out, and people were going to visit by airplane.
Airplane. That's so a port for the air.
Correct.
Now, I have to draw the line, gentlemen. No one has asked me for my permission, of course, but absolutely not. We spent thousands of years keeping our feet on the ground for a reason. I just want it noted that birds have wings, and I do not.
Yeah, but with airplanes, you can travel from here to California in a matter of hours.
California? What's that?
Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. Just last thing, I guess, is, real quick, Ken, what's going on? What does the future of transportation look like in Madison? Obviously, with all the truck traffic, that's a major concern.
Yes, so as people who live around here know, that 441 is kind of getting four-laned because it is the main route from Savannah to here, from the port to here. So hopefully at some point we'll have a second bypass that goes around so the trucks don't come through town.
Well, we'll talk about the transportation plan on another episode. In the meantime, you've been listening to a different episode of the Marc McMain Show on Real Country 92.3. Bob Furr signing off. Be back Tuesday with part 3 of America Tuesdays 250 by 50. Thanks for joining us.